Our next teacher is the founder and CEO at MyCrypto. She very quickly transitioned from being a front-end developer to a security and usability expert, a customer support expert, and more, when her open source tool turned into one of the most widely used products in the Ethereum space. It is my great pleasure to introduce you to Taylor Monahan.
Thank you. Oh God, what am I gonna do with the cup? All right. You guys all got cookies, right? Because I'm jealous. I did not get a cookie. I hope you saved some for me. Awesome. So yeah, as she mentioned, we're going to talk about balancing security and usability. And this is one of the most probably difficult tasks in this space because this space requires everyone to be really, really, really secure. There are a ton of attack vectors. There are a ton of threats. But because cryptocurrency is so unique, if you hadn't noticed, like the UX in general kind of sucks these days. So we have a lot of people building products where they're obsessed with building a really usable product, but sometimes they kind of throw security by the wayside. And then vice versa. If you build the most secure product in the entire world, can anyone actually use it? So really briefly, and by the way, we're going to have fun with this, so I hope you enjoy. We are going to kind of talk about what is security and then what is usability. So what is security? At the most basic level, security is not letting people who shouldn't have stuff have that stuff. So this could mean a private key, right? You don't want someone that shouldn't have your private key to have your private key. This could be your television in your house. You don't want a burglar to come in and break in and grab your TV either. So it encompasses a lot of things. And the biggest one in sort of the tech space is actually access. So the end goal may be getting private keys or the money, but access is a huge problem in this space and anytime you're dealing with, servers and money and keys and stuff like that. So if you guys don't know, this meme is like, it's just so true, it hurts. The cloud is like not some fancy magical thing. It's basically just another computer. And so in the same way that your personal computer or your personal phone can be compromised via malware or phishing or any number of vectors, the cloud can also be compromised in the same way. And the sort of types of not types of threats, but types of people that you need to be aware of when you're building in this space. It's sort of like, you can see the grid, right? You have malicious external actors, and these are the ones that are kind of most talked about. Those are the hackers and the scammers and the burglars. Those are the ones that, oh my God, I got a cookie, I'm so happy. Those are the ones that people are talking about because they're scary, right? If you like Google any of these images, they're like black and red and terrifying and all of these things. But these other sort of three grids are also things that you have to be concerned about. So ignorant external actors are a thing. So that can be like kind of like these script kiddies that are playing around. If you guys are aware of the parody multi-sig lockup incident, supposedly it was just like a kind of a script kiddie messing around and he accidentally locked up like $200 million worth of ETH. Users are the biggest one, obviously. These are ignorant people who may not be trying to hack you, but they can certainly do things like lose their private key or not do something correctly, which at the end of the day will result in lost money. And then I put like my shoplifting 1-year-old because my daughter loves, whenever we go grocery shopping, I swear, she'll grab something and she just holds on to it, and then we get to the car and I'm like, where, what? Like, oh my God, I didn't pay for this. And then on the internal side, it's really easy. It's anyone that you hire or interact with, whether they're a consultant, an employee, a contractor, they work for you for a day or a year or 5 years, they are threats. And they're threats sometimes because they're malicious, but most often because they're ignorant, right? You can do all of these things to lock down the security of your company, and then someone just really wants to listen to that new album and goes to some stupid torrent site and compromises your entire network security. So these are all things you have to be really, really careful of. So I'm gonna go through these slides really quickly. The slides are on Sketch if you wanna dive deeper, and then we might return to this at the end because I love talking about this stuff. These are basically everything bad that's happened in this space broken down into categories. So, first off, threat is anytime anyone gains access to your backend, your database, your keys, your infrastructure, your wallets. These are most of the exchange hacks. Some notable ones, Coincheck lost $532 million from breached infrastructure. Shapeshift, they have their awesome Looting of the Fox article, which is amazing if you haven't read it. But basically, they hired a new employee. This new employee stole some keys, installed some stuff, sold it to an external hacker. They didn't lose too much, but obviously any amount is too much. Back in the very early days, you had Bitcoinica. And this was an interesting one because they did not compromise their security. They actually compromised the security of Linode themselves. And Linode is where Bitcoinica was hosted. So they went sort of above and then snuck in. And there was actually 7 other services that were hacked during that time. And often, spear phishing employees is one method that, they'll spear phish someone, they'll get in that way, and then they'll escalate or use a combination of information in order to get in to the keys, the infrastructure, whatever it is. The next is gaining access to sort of the front end, whether that's the website, your application, maybe non-integral accounts, meaning your social media accounts or your email accounts. So the most notable one recently was Mew. They actually did a BGP hijack, which is basically breaking the internet in order to redirect people to a clone of Mew and steal the private keys. Black Wallet, they were around for 6 months before they compromised the Black Wallet Cloudflare account. Again, cloning the site, but compromising the private keys. CoinDash was an ICO. They got into their front end and they just changed out the ICO address. So about, I don't know how many people, but $7 million was sent to the hacker's address voluntarily because it was being displayed on the Coincheck ICO or CoinDash ICO page. And then we see this all the time. Social, email, messaging accounts, they'll be phishing links. Hey, can you send me 1 Bitcoin really quick? I don't have access to my ledger. People will impersonate me and they'll email my employees. All sorts of stuff, and then obviously phishing sites, another big one. Gaining access to admin or user credentials / authentication. So basically, sometimes you'll actually compromise the infrastructure. You'll get in the database, et cetera, things like application vulnerabilities. This is you get access to some credentials somehow, and then you do bad things. And it's really interesting in the Ethereum space because we've seen this sort of escalation where they're actually compromising the private keys that have authority to change smart contracts. So this happened with Bancor, and it happened with the Kick ICO, and they basically were able to compromise the admin keys, and then that admin key was able to upgrade the contract, and then the hacker was able to basically upgrade the contract, which meant, sending the hacker all the money. And then phishers as well, they always trick users into giving their keys, their credentials, and then stealing the money. And another one that a lot of people really do not think about, but it happens all the time, is third-party dependencies or vulnerability in those dependencies. So Gate.io used StatCounter for their analytics. The hackers did not compromise Gate.io. They didn't go after Gate.io employees. They just were hey, we'll just compromise StatCounter. And because this little piece of JavaScript runs anytime you go to Gate.io, we now have access to Gate.io. And at MyCrypto, we actually take insane measures when it comes to dependencies, both things we include in our packages, but also we don't have any third-party URLs on our site at all. We don't have an analytics that is some random thing because every one of those is a vulnerability or a potential vulnerability. And then Bakerail and Cryptsy had similar ones. They basically, there was backdoors or something put in the node software that they were using for the exchange, and then they were just busted in the exchange that way. And then the last one is probably one of my I don't know, least favorite, but most interesting lately. So event stream is an NPM package, JavaScript package that everyone relies on apparently, but nobody knows. It was maintained by a single developer. It was free open source software. And he wasn't getting paid for this. Nobody knew who he was. Nobody knew that they were relying on this package. And some dude was like, hey, I'll maintain this for you. And he was like, sure, that sounds great. And then they basically took over the repo, and they specifically changed a couple lines of code to steal directly from BitPay users. And this is, like, when we talk about the lengths that people will go to compromise crypto, like, this is what we're talking about. And then another new one, tricking smart contracts. So you guys are probably wildly aware of these. The DAO parity #1 and parity #2. The DAO obviously had the reentrancy vulnerability that you're probably aware of. The parity multisig #1 was they basically they found a bug in the multisig that a lot of big ICOs and companies used, and they stole from 3 companies. And then the rest of the funds were actually rescued by a white hat group before the rest were stolen. And then a few weeks later, I mentioned this earlier, the dude accidentally suicided this on-chain library. So we're going to see more of these, I guarantee it. We are not good at writing smart contracts yet. We should get better at writing smart contracts. And if you're writing smart contracts, please take like unnecessary steps to secure this, because especially with parity in the DAO, nobody was really prepared for the amount of money that these things were holding. And just because your product or your idea or your smart contract is small today doesn't mean that it's going to be small tomorrow. And then I think this last one, I don't know, tricking people. So you can trick the blockchain, Bitcoin in their whatever $184 billion bug where just coins were created out of thin air. Spear phishing campaigns, bad implementations, race conditions, early in Poloniex days, they just like, you would just like basically be like, withdraw really, really fast, and then you would just withdraw all the money even though you didn't have that money. We have gotten better at some of these things, but they still do happen. And then the one that is really close to my heart, obviously, is tricking the user or exposing the user to bad things happening. So on the tricking the user side, we have phishing, we have scams, we have social attacks, we have those messages that you see on Twitter that are like, yo, if you give me a little bit of Bitcoin, I'll give you a lot of Bitcoin. And then you also have these things that if you're a product developer, you have to be really, really aware of, where users do things wrong all the time, and you have a responsibility to warn them and educate them. So that's educating them about things like, you should copy and paste your address, don't hand type it. Educating them about like the core concepts of your app. So in the DeFi space in Ethereum right now, like lending is a huge thing. Everyone's talking about it. However, nobody's talking about the risks of these lending platforms. So everyone is talking about, oh my God, you can earn 12% interest, that's better than a bank. What they're not talking about is, yeah, and if the price goes down, you could be liquidated and lose that. Or, yeah, it's in a smart contract that's been audited once, maybe. And then another one is, yeah, just making bad security choices in your application or your website. So if you didn't notice, so many of those slides included phishing. And it's pretty remarkable how phishing basically is one of the doors that, regardless of the end goal or how it's compromised in the end, phishing is almost always involved, always. Any questions, comments, concerns, additions? No? Good? Okay, we'll keep going. So, usability. So, on the flip side of everything I just talked about, we have usability, which is making a product that's super, super easy to use, right? So, usability encapsulates things like, how easy is it to access and understand this product? How easy is it to use it? When I'm using it, what do I feel? Am I confident in the choices that I make? Do I know which button to press? Do I understand the risks of these products, et cetera? And then your learnability is one that people often don't talk about, but in a space like crypto, how easy is it to learn more about your product and the underlying technology and the core concepts? Because yes, a lot of people want their product to just be super easy to use, thank you, super easy to use right off the bat. But the reality is that crypto is complicated, and the new concepts that come along with it are complicated. So it doesn't necessarily mean that your product has to just be dead simple from the get-go. You can gradually onboard the user, you can take them through steps, you can educate them, and that all of those things are gonna improve your usability. And another really great thing to remember is that usability depends on both the user and also your product. So for example, I use my product all the time without any issues. I will greatly say that it's the most usable product ever, right? However, if I go into the support box, I see a number of users having tremendous trouble with my product. And so it's good to remember that just because you think your product is great doesn't mean anyone else does. And it's good to also sort of be aware of who your target audience is. So if you're building, say, an enterprise-grade product, maybe you don't want the slickest interface that's going to attract crypto Twitter and all the noobs entering the space. Maybe you want something that's going to attract a more mature generation, people that like the information, that want to know about your systems and your underlying infrastructure so they can make an informed decision. And those things may not lead to the most minimalist design, but they're the right design for your user base. And I don't know if, I hope you guys have seen this. This is like one of my favorite things because it's like a photo tells 1,000 words. So you have design, it's what you want, it's what you intend, it's the pretty things, it's perfect. And then you have user experience, which is, the shortest path. I'm just gonna take it, I don't care if it's ugly. And so I kind of upgraded it a little bit though, because this is crypto. So, when people do unexpected things with your crypto products, it usually leads to like pretty much certain death. It really does. So a great example is very early in the days of my product, we did not force users to back up their private keys. It was a great experience. You literally clicked a button and you got your private key and your address and everything. You didn't have to click again. It was amazing. I loved it. I got it. My friends got it. We didn't lose our private keys. And then as the market started to take off, we were getting thousands of support tickets about people who did not, just never saved it. And it forced us to create a flow that is now 4 or 5 clicks that you literally have to save it. You cannot continue on without saving it. And in the end, it's actually a better user experience, though, because the original user experience is that. And the new user experience is basically forcing them on this design path. And when it comes to people losing money, it's really important that you force them down that right path. You guys are in crypto, right? You know this. Whenever you send a brand new address or your new wallet, you're kind of a bit puckered. So here that is. Any questions, comments, things about usability? Good? Okay. So, why the heck does this even matter? Anyone have any ideas? Yeah?
Well, we're not going to build a new global financial ecosystem if people aren't able to onboard into it or don't know why it matters.
Yes, I love that. So if you guys didn't hear that, she says, if we're building a new global financial system, we need people to get in and to be able to use it. Some things that I said was, she was much more positive. But if you have bad UX, if you have insecure products, if you have users doing unexpected things which lead to their certain death, in this space, unfortunately, that really means that you have real people losing real money. And the high ROI on stealing crypto really, really, really makes everyone a target. I can't emphasize this enough. Like, I'm here on stage. If I told you that I got hacked once, you guys would be like, yeah, duh, like, you're on stage. But you're in this room, or you're watching this online, or whatever you're doing, just the fact that you're here or the fact that you're watching it makes you a target as well. Crypto is very, very different. The hackers can literally get it, and then they can move it around, and they can cash out, they can buy things with it with such ease. You know, we're not talking about a pile of user data, we're not talking about credit cards that are going to be canceled, we're talking about like basically cold hard cash. And so because of that, you have really sophisticated attackers, you know, doing really sophisticated things to get their hands on money, but you also have like random teenagers who have too much time on their hands who are just doing things to do them. And that's why you have this whole range of things like BGP hijacks, which are really sophisticated, all the way down to like, please send, you know, me 0.1 Bitcoin via Twitter giveaway scams. You know, and it's the whole range, and every single one of those people, every single one of those scams, they continue happening because they're profitable, right? The Twitter giveaways would stop if people didn't fall for them. And when I talk about like the blockchain and crypto being super unique, the biggest sort of difference is that users are now in full control. And this is a benefit, right? We're taking the power away from the centralized parties, and we're giving it to individual people. But that's not always a good thing, especially if your users don't understand that or they don't expect that. And another one is that there's no do-overs. So, you know, in the traditional world, you can reset your password, you can go back, you can email customer support, and they're gonna save the day. Unfortunately, in crypto, if you send to that wrong address, it's just gone forever. There's no going back, there's no doing it over, there's no undo button. And that's really strikingly different. And again, the very, very worst user experience is the one where people lose their money. So I know as you're building products, you want this perfect design. You want everything to be beautiful and sleek, and you want it to just work. And sometimes, in order to make that happen, you sacrifice things like security. And I just want to remind you that if people lose their money, like that's the bad UX, right? Me adding going from 1 click to 5 clicks, you would think that that's bad UX, but it was actually good UX because it prevented probably millions of dollars from being lost, right? So keep this in mind, and if you are working for a company or making a product decision that you're gonna have to make a trade-off between security and usability, remember this one. So what are sort of the biggest usability concerns in this space right now? Number one, people expect that same easy experience that they currently have with whatever products that they interact with. So if you look at your phone screen, you see the apps you interact with, that's what people are expecting. The next time something goes wrong with your bank account, what do? What happens? Think about that, because that's what people that are entering this space are expecting. And if your experience is different, for whatever reason, you probably want to either try to make it more similar or educate the user about why it's different and make them aware of that difference. And this one, hopefully we can improve at some point, but for some reason, we love to make up new words in this space. And it's even gotten to the point where new chains and new products are making up new words to replace the new words that were made up 2 years ago. And for a new person, it is insanely confusing. It's also one of those things that as you get more and more advanced into the space, you kind of forget how intimidating it was when you first entered. So just even down to concepts like seed words and private keys and addresses and transactions, and these things are they're bizarre, and when you combine them all and throw them on a landing page, they're even more bizarre. And then when you put a big warning at the bottom that says, hey, by the way, you can't ever do over, so be careful, that just leads to an insane amount of fear and people running away. And if we want this space to be accessible for all, we need to figure out a way to communicate and use words and analogies and concepts and communicate with our users in a way that they understand. And this is one example that I am just really acutely familiar with, but people have really become accustomed to sort of like the banks or their payment processors or their app, like their Grubhub and their DoorDash and their Ubers, right? Like if something goes wrong, they just like undo it, right? My bank, I don't even have to call my bank and be like, hey, my credit card got frauded. They actually text me and they're like, hey, your credit card got frauded like an hour ago. And, you know, now that I'm building a financial product that has people sending money, yeah, they don't, like, I can't do that for them. And then they email me mad, you know, when I didn't email them to tell them that their account got frauded. But then also when I tell them, and by the way, I can't do anything about it now. So as the sort of general traditional tech products get better, and especially the startups that are very well funded, you know, basically will like refund first, ask questions later. We see this PayPal, Grubhub, Ubers, DoorDashes, like all of those. Products in the crypto space that can't provide that same experience are gonna have a tougher and tougher time. And it's really something that we need to be aware of if we're gonna compete with, you know, the Ubers and the Grubhubs and the banks and the PayPals. Sorry. So one of the most interesting things about this space is that as time goes on, you actually get more scared, right? You may be more confident in what you're doing. You may understand the words better. You may understand the products better. But you also have this knowledge of all the things that can go wrong. So that first time you're sending to a new wallet, it's scary. The 10th time, though, it's really scary because you've probably watched other people screw up. You may have screwed up once, and you know of all the different things that can go wrong. And as we're building products in the space, we need to be acutely aware of that because ideally, as a user becomes onboarded to the space, everything would be easier. They would be doing things with more confidence. They would be having a better experience. And it's a bit crazy to think about the fact that crypto is kind of the opposite. All right, so back to security. Or, well, actually, questions? Anyone? Comments? Are you with me? Yeah, Shira?
Well, back to the first thing you said, which is people expect the same experience they currently have.
Yeah.
I'm just curious whether you're looking at, or you think we should be looking at, people that maybe don't. Like people who are using cash, say in an urban area in India, and they have smartphones, but they're using cash for all of their transactions. Like there might be frictions there or problems with that. That crypto actually would be better.
Right.
So do you think about that yet, or is that like in the future for you? Kind of looking for those places where crypto is a, say, 5x, 10x improvement over current financial.
Right, exactly. So based on like my experience and the fact that I am a very white woman living in a developed nation, building for pretty much other people living in developed nations, the things that I am most sort of aware of are sort of the the experience versus banks and the experience versus PayPal and the experience versus Venmo. That said, one of the things that crypto does offer is the ability to really bring this technology to developing nations. And there has been this phenomena a number of times where developing nations actually will sort of like skip over a step that the rest of the world went through. And yeah, as you said, 10x, right? So they just go straight to it. And that's something that we may see if people focus on building those products. What I will say is that if you're building a product for a really developing nation where literally everyone is using phones, probably those phones are not iPhones, they're probably older phones, things like that. You have to be aware of their current experience and their current interactions. And so you have to, even though they don't expect, say, the bank to reverse a cash transaction, they may not have even interacted with the bank, what is frictionless about cash, right? Like the ability to pull cash out of your pocket and give it to someone and that person to immediately be able to count it and put it in their pocket. there is friction to it, but there's also not friction to that specific experience. So how can you replicate that experience when we're talking about phones that may not be the most up-to-date and applications that may not be the most QA'd and all the things that crypto currently has? Anything else? All right, we're just going to keep moving, but you guys can jump in at any time. So what are the biggest sort of security concerns? Obviously, we went through those slides at the beginning of all the bad things that have ever happened in crypto. But generally speaking, there are just huge piles of money everywhere, right? If you have a product in the space, even though like my crypto, my product, it's non-custodial, meaning we don't hold your money. We don't have access to huge piles of money. The reality is that if you do compromise our product, like we saw with Mew, you still have access to huge piles of money, albeit a lot of really small piles of money. And then, you still have exchanges, which are, literally holding big piles of money. And then writing really good, robust, secure code is hard. And this is especially true like with the smart contracts and these sort of new programming languages where, yeah, it's sort of like JavaScript, but it's not. And by the way, you're protecting huge piles of money. And by the way, we haven't figured out all of the edge cases. And by the way, you thought that it was going to be protecting $5 million, but actually it's $150 million. It's hard, right? We don't want to downplay the fact that this is hard. And in this space, FOMO just dominates over OPSEC. We saw this all the time when we were dealing with the ICO craze of 2017. People would literally throw their money. Like they would onboard via Coinbase. They would throw their money into our product to get it into an ICO. And then they would sort of ask questions later, like, where's my private key? How do I see my tokens? And it was, I underestimated how powerful the FOMO and the hype was. It will make people do very irrational things, and it will also make people lose their money very, very quickly. The greed and the optimism and the hope and it was really, really an insane time. And another one, this is especially true for myself, is a lot of the products in this space are run by really inexperienced teams that are going through tremendous growth. So as, for example, my product started as literally an open source tool on GitHub by me and my co-founder, and that was it. It was a part-time thing. We both had paid jobs. That's all we expected it to be. And fast forward a year and a half, and literally hundreds of millions of dollars was being sent through our product probably every day for these ICOs. And I will be the first to admit that I'm not probably the person you want running that sort of company. I've done the best that I can, and a lot of people in the space are in that same boat. But when we are, asking why are these products insecure, why are mistakes being made, we've solved this 50 years ago. The answer is the founders of these companies didn't expect to be in that position. The founders of these companies aren't 50 years old. They don't know these things. And especially when you're experiencing tremendous growth and there's just fires everywhere, a lot of things do just kind of slip through the cracks. So as the ecosystem matures, I'm hoping to see, myself, obviously, but myself, my team, my product, the teams that I work with, the products that I work with, also become more experienced, learn from history, have dedicated people on their teams that are dedicated to things like usability and security. We're seeing this a bit on the UX. A lot of companies have realized that, hey, we should have an in-house designer. And that's great. And I'm hoping that we'll see the same on the security front, where you literally have dedicated people that exist to keep you, your employees, everyone safe and secure. Questions, security, stuff, anything? Still with me? All right. So this is the most important part of the talk because, I just spent like 20 minutes talking about everything that is sort of hard or wrong or scary about this ecosystem. But the real question is, what the hell can we do about it? I assume that you guys are all either in this space because you want to make it better, you're building a product, you're running a product, you're investing in products, whatever it is. What can we actually do? So the first one, and I've tried to keep these really general, so, apply them to your own experience, but educate yourself. So obsessively read about things in this ecosystem. Stay up to date. When there's a new hack, read about how that hack happened. Read about how they addressed the hack. Read about who is involved in determining the source of the hack. Connect with those people. This space is still very, very small. It's very easy to learn from other people in this space. And right along with that, learn from others' mistakes. When someone gets hacked, your first question should be, how did that happen, and how do I make sure it doesn't happen to my product, right? Train your entire team on security, even those non-technical people. So your designer, you probably think doesn't need to know about security. They don't have access to anything that's important. They're just, creating pretty things, et cetera, et cetera. That's not the way you want to think about it. Your designer is creating your product, and that's like the face of your product, and they need to be just as informed about security and the mistakes users make and the potential downsides of not doing things properly so that they can design the best product possible. And hire a dedicated security person or team. Just do it. I know that there's a list of people that you want to hire, and you need an office manager and all of these things, but you really, really, really need to have someone who spends their days just protecting you, and especially someone who, when things go wrong, they can help pick up the pieces. The worst time to be looking for a security expert is during a crisis or after a crisis. And I hate to say it, but be scared. Just be scared. Read about these things, take them into your heart, and be scared, because that's going to inspire action, and it's going to ensure that you don't forget about the risks about your product or your team or your infrastructure or your setup or your office or whatever it is. And then secondly, educate your users. So users are remarkable beings. They are, first off, they're humans, right? They're people. I am a user. You are a user. Everyone is a user. They will always take the path of least resistance. They will make mistakes, but they will also surprise you with how quickly they can learn and pick up on things. They'll surprise you with how the littlest detail can make a big difference in their actions. You want to warn them. You want to do things for them. You want to check their actions. You want to make sure they're not doing something bad. You want to talk to them. And take, the time and dedicate some effort to teaching them, whether that's articles online, whether that's a knowledge base, whether that's really good customer support answers, and especially within your product itself. A lot of these really sleek minimalist UIs don't have the tooltips and don't have rooms for paragraphs of text, but a simple sentence explaining what the product is, a simple warning that displays right before they're going to send. You can integrate things that make the UX better without cluttering the design. And be secure by default. So if you're running a custodial service, or somehow, some way, custodianship comes into play, and you have the ability to give users things like 2FA or email notifications or alerts, do it, and do it by default. It still surprises me when I test out a new exchange and they don't make me put 2FA on it. Limit access internally. So especially early in a product, a lot of times the credentials just float around. You send them around. They're laying out on a desk somewhere. And then right before production, you're like, okay, let's lock it down. You're just building bad habits from the get-go. You want to limit access to valuable things everywhere from the very, very start. And then you want to audit them frequently and take away that access just as frequently. Simply don't let users, but also like your team members and yourself, do bad things or potentially bad things. If they have the ability to go down that path, if it's the easiest path, they will go down it. If it's a hard path, some will still go down it, trust me. And definitely, don't ever make an insecure choice on behalf of your user. So this is especially important when we think about smart contracts and how they're developing and evolving. Crypto Twitter is really obsessed with this Lego meme of the DeFi products being built on each other. But we're getting really close to products making financial decisions on behalf of users, and those products being smart contracts that are perhaps not the most securely developed. And that's a really terrifying prospect because I'm not sure that we're able to do that, and anyone should be doing that. And whether your product is a smart contract or not, think about what information you're giving your users and how they're making the decisions. And if you don't give them the ability to say no, you've made a choice on their behalf. And if that choice is insecure or it puts them at risks, that's on you, and that's not a place that we want the ecosystem to be. I call this one check everything, but it's also sort of like question everything. And this is when it really helps to have a team made of rebels and debaters and questioners, because this is where you sort of suss out the hard things about a product and make sure things are secure and usable. So asking questions like, should a user be able to do this? Does a user actually want to do this? Is the behavior that this user is taking anomalous in any regard, right? Is it weird compared to their past behaviors? Is it weird compared to other people's behaviors? If it is weird, should we maybe throw a warning up there? And this is one of my favorite games, which is called What's the Worst Thing That Could Happen? So you get this new design. It's freaking brilliant. You love it. The colors are amazing. And then you have to play what's the worst that could happen. So does this brilliant new design actually inform the user about what's going on? Does it educate them about the risks? Is this sort of change that you're making to the design taking away information that was previously there that could open up risks? And is your decision relying on some assumption that, nothing's going to be compromised, nothing bad will ever happen? Ask yourself, what's sort of the trail that your decision was based on? And if you are making a lot of assumptions that everything will be fine, then you probably want to go down the path in your head or with your team. Okay, what happens if GitHub is compromised? Okay, so they push bad code to GitHub, then what? Who could be affected? Okay, but if you deploy the code from GitHub, then what happens? Who can be affected? What access, is that? Et cetera, et cetera. So this really is going to change depending on what you're building and how you're building it, but it's a fun game. And then, so try to prevent bad things from happening. So I'm going to go through these slides really quick, and then we'll go back. But try to prevent bad things from happening, and then you want to detect bad things when they happen, and then you want to have a plan and use that plan when they happen. And this is critical for everything. So obviously, first off, you don't want bad things to happen. So things like having external security audits, having processes that make people do things and check things, do risk assessments. Ask yourselves, where are those single points of failure? How can we get rid of them? But just because you try to prevent bad things from happening doesn't mean you can ignore the rest of the process. Assuming bad things happen, which they do and they will, how can you detect bad things? What monitors can you put in place? How can you remove the single points of failures? Who's going to detect this? I will say we have probably 5 or 6 different tools to detect things automatically. And every time something bad has happened, it's either in a support ticket or one of our internal team members that's been the first to notice, because there are always weird things and it's always at 4 a.m. So empower your support team, but also empower your Twitter network and your users to get a hold of you when something bad happens. And in that same vein, there's like a number of security lists online, but like your public, sort of how do people contact you, make that public so that when something goes bad, they're not sitting there going like, well, I wish I could call them, but I can't, so oh well. Have a plan, really just hire a security person, but basically incident response, you wanna have people that are around 24/7, you wanna have a way to wake my ass up because that little Slack doop isn't gonna wake me up at 4 a.m. If you're doing smart contracts or anything that has the ability to be locked down, definitely have that big red button in place so that you can just press it and lock everything down and then deal and clean up later. And then connect with other security experts in the space, right? If something goes wrong, you're not gonna be equipped to deal with it. Who can you call? Who is equipped to deal with it? How can you build a relationship with them? Because again, and this happens all the time, the worst time to be finding someone to trust is when like everything's on fire. And if you hadn't noticed, this talk was really a lot about security and not much about usability, and I hope I didn't disappoint you. But the reason for that is, again, the worst user experience is one where people lose money. So as much as you focus on the pretty things and the brilliant things and the usability and the UX, always remember that your users will surprise you. They will go down these paths that you don't want them to go down. Sometimes it will seem that they are intentionally trying to lose their money. Take the steps to secure your infrastructure, your product, everything, and take steps to educate your users so that they can be secure when they use your product. Sorry. And that's really all I got for you. I will say that we're all here building the decentralized future. This is my thing. If you are here to build, if you have unique skills, if you want to contribute to this ecosystem, come find me after or email us at jobs@mycrypto. We're always looking for amazing people, technical people, not technical people, who are here to make a difference and change other people's lives. Thank you.